One of the first things you can do is make relevant introductions. You should always be looking to connect people who'd benefit from knowing each other. If something great happens from that synergy when you make those connections, guess who's going to receive attribution for the value created? Yours truly. So let's talk about opportunities where it might be appropriate to connect two people and create value for somebody else. The first situation is when you meet somebody who has insight or skills that someone you're trying to build a relationship with would benefit from knowing. The second situation is where two people you meet share a similar interest or goal. Note, these don't have to always be related to tech or somebody's job. When I meet two people who love to play squash or running and think they'd like to know each other, I'll connect them. I think it's always important to remember that people do have lives outside of work as well. There's probably a few other situations where it might make sense to connect two people, but these two are both pretty obvious ones that I come across frequently. So I wanted to show you an example email of what this looks like and a connection I made between two of my friends, Shyla and Grant. The context was that Shyla told me she was starting an organization which is now called Institute. At the time, she wanted to help young people apprentice under experienced executives and founders. When she told me this, I immediately thought of my buddy Grant, who's working as a chief of staff, which is kind of like an apprentice type position for the CEO of a well respected media firm in New York City. I thought it made sense to connect them because he was pretty much doing the exact job that she was looking to create and insert young people into. So I broached the introduction to Grant with Shyla when she told me what she was doing, and she told me that she'd love to connect with him. I told her that I'd see if Grant was open to it and get back to her. That day I emailed Grant explaining the situation, and he said he was down to talk to her. I then sent this email, which reads as follows. Hey Shyla, meet my close buddy Grant, the official chief of staff for the CEO of blank media firm. I gave him a brief background on how you're hopefully making the chief of staff a household name and wanted to connect you guys. I'll let you all stars take it from here. Because I had already given a background to both people, I didn't need to explain in depth why I wanted to connect them. They already had this information. So you can see that this is a pretty simple way and simple example of how to create value for two people. And it doesn't, it's a 3 sentence email. It doesn't really take some complicated email or way to connect them. So let's talk about what not to do. So there's few things within the professional context that I dislike more than shotgun introductions. If you're not familiar with what I'm talking about, it's when someone introduces you to another person without first asking you whether you'd like the introduction. You need to realize that when you introduce someone to another person, you're potentially putting a burden on their time. This is why it's so critical to make sure that the other party actually wants to be introduced to that person. Otherwise, you're just potentially encroaching on someone else's time and then putting them in an awkward situation if they don't actually want to meet with the other person. Here's an example of a shotgun introduction I received. I opened my inbox and saw that this person had offered up my time to meet with this other person without asking me if it was okay first. It's just not cool. I actually feel less close to the person who did this than I did before because of this introduction. So let's go and talk about a better way to approach the situation when there's an opportunity to connect two people. Once I see that two people or identify that two people should know each other, I approach one person in either conversation or email asking if they'd like to connect with the person I have in mind. Here's an example of what this might look like in email. Hey, person's name. I just met XYZ, and he mentioned he has been focused on trying to improve X skill. He's a really smart entrepreneur, and I thought it'd be great to connect you guys. If you want, I can see if he has time to connect and then make an introduction. No obligation, obviously. Just let me know if you're interested. Best, Scott. Let's break this down. The subject should be the word plus the word intro plus the person's name and company so that whoever you're emailing can easily distinguish what this is about. The first sentence should be about providing more context to the title by restating the person's name you'd like to introduce them to and hint at why you're reaching out. In this case, that's the fact that I understood that they were trying to improve this skill, and someone I just met has expertise in that and might be able to help them out. The second sentence is about supporting the case for why this person should want to connect with the contact I'm trying to introduce them to. You need to tailor this to, given what you know, why that person would want to connect with this other person. In this instance, I'm calibrating the sentence with the fact that my friend enjoys meeting talented entrepreneurs. The third sentence is essentially outright asking this person if they want to get connected, and then broaching my willingness to see if I can make that happen. And then finally, the last sentence is about giving this person an out. It may turn out that they have no interest in meeting this person, or maybe they just currently don't have the bandwidth. Whatever it is, you need to make sure you give this person a buffer and the comfort to say no. The words no obligation give them permission to do this. Okay, once you send this email, your job is to wait until you get confirmation that they want to connect. This should take the form of a sure or yeah, please, totally, introduce us. Now, when this happens, it's time to approach the other side and see if they're willing to connect as well. Here's what that email looks like. Hey X, I remember you saying you were looking for help with Y skill. I actually have a friend who specializes in that. If you think it'd be helpful, I'd be happy to connect you. No obligation, obviously. I just thought it might be helpful. Best, Scott. The formula is slightly different. The subject line should be the same exact thing, except you're going to switch out the name with the other person's name. The first sentence should be context alluding to why you're considering making this introduction. In this case, it's because I remember them saying they were looking for help with this particular thing. The second sentence is a follow-up to the first, providing more specific context, including the person's name, who you'd like to introduce them to. I always like to use the words I actually, because it makes the introduction seem coincidental or as a matter of fact, rather than me being incredibly proactive about being a super connector. I don't think that people want to just think that I'm out there brokering relationships for my personal gain. And truthfully, you never should be. The third sentence indicates your willingness to make the introduction in a non-overbearing way. And when you say something, if you think it'd be helpful, that's not necessarily obligatory. So that's like a great phrase to put before broaching that you'd like to make the introduction. And again, the last sentence provides them an out in case they don't actually want the introduction. I feel like the phrase, I just thought it might be helpful, is a great way to close this email because it solidifies the fact that you're just trying to be thoughtful. Note, there are going to be some times when this person will get back to you and say, no thanks. And that's totally okay because all you promised previously, the other person, was an attempt to see if this person had time to connect. When they don't, you can simply get back to the first person you broached the intro with and say that they're really busy right now and you'll get back to them later. Okay, let's go ahead and assume that they said yes, they'd like to be introduced. Now it's time to make the actual intro. Here's a simple template you can use. Hi, first name. I wanted to connect you with my friend Y. I have already given him the heads up that you were looking for help with X and thought it'd be great to introduce you guys. I'll let you take it from here. It's that simple. It doesn't need to be that long. I've already given the context about why I wanted to connect them to both people. So now it's just about actually making that happen. And you can literally use this script and plug and play the names if you follow this template that I outlined before. So these introductions that are relevant and provide value to others accomplish multiple things. One, there's a potential for real value creation in these people's lives. That's awesome. Again, if good things happen, you're going to be thought of as the person who helped make that happen. Two, you're positioning yourself as a thoughtful person. This makes you likable, which is a great thing, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later. Three, you've created this kind of karmic debt. Remember the law of reciprocity? You've helped this person out and given them the opportunity to connect with somebody that's potentially going to make their lives better. And what that means is they now feel like they're needing to pay you back or they owe you something. So again, this is, taking advantage of that social concept that we mentioned earlier called the law of reciprocity. And trust me, it just works. Now, if you really want to be a hero, you can follow up with the person that you made an intro on behalf of, that you're trying to build a relationship, a few weeks after making the introduction, just to see if anything came of it. Here's a simple script to do that. Hey X, I wanted to check in to see if you ever actually ended up connecting with Y. Anything useful ever come of it? This does a few things. Number one, if something awesome comes between the connection, it reaffirms and reminds them that it was because of you that happened. Number two, it gives you a sense of how serious people take the introductions you make. This is really good intelligence to have moving forward. If someone's constantly flaking every time you make an introduction to them, you want to stop making introductions to that person. So it's good to know whether they actually ended up connecting. Lastly, this is a natural reason to touch base with somebody you're trying to build a relationship with. We'll talk about this more, but the key ingredient to take an acquaintance to a trusted friend or colleague is consistency, where ideally each interaction you're making with the other person is making their lives better. Okay, so this concludes my primer on making relevant introductions. If you take nothing else away from this, just make sure you don't make shotgun introductions and always ask for permission first before you're introducing somebody. Unless, of course, you're introducing someone to Jack Dorsey or Mark Zuckerberg. I would happily take a shotgun intro from them.